I can't even top that good story. Wow, that was a really good one. Well, thanks for coming back to our last night. That's good. It's gorgeous out and there's football and you still came, so thank you. If you've liked this series, let Travis Fink know. And if you don't like this series, that's who you go to as well, okay? I'm just the messenger, but you go to him. But so I couldn't even wait for tonight because your questions, okay, some I just laughed out loud. I loved the honesty. And so we are going to get through every single one of the questions in a quick way. And the really cool thing is many of you had the same questions. So hopefully that helps feel like you're not doing this all alone. So our first week, we really talked about how we got to regulate ourselves as parents. It's really where it's got to start. And I just read this quote. I don't know if any of you have read that Viktor Frankl book, A Man's Search for Meaning. It's just powerful, powerful. And so when I was spending a little time in prayer, I found this quote from him. Between stimulus, so if you think of the issue, so any issue you're having with your child, between stimulus and the response, there's space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies growth and freedom. But if we don't have space, we react. So I just think if you take nothing away from this series, when we have a situation with our kids, we gotta have a little space before we react. And I'll have parents say, like Travis, but I have 5 kids, or I have a baby, or I have 4 and they're all in the minivan. But here's how fast space can happen. It can be with a deep breath, it can be closing our eyes, and it can be, Jesus, help me love these children with grace. I mean, that's like 20 seconds. Or it could be at the kitchen sink. I'm going to take a drink of water. Jesus, please help me see and hear my children. If you are driving home from work and you pull up in your garage and the kids are already inside, sit in your car for 5 minutes. Now, if your spouse is inside, they're not going to appreciate if you're in there like an hour because they're so ready for you to be home. But take 5 minutes, because if we forget that space, then we're just reacting. And I love that. Then last week we talked about really relating to our little children. They're messy and they're sticky and they're kind of little turkeys, but wow. What would we do without them? I just counseled a person this week that said, I am so lonely. And I thought, wow, I kind of forget that, what loneliness feels like. Because usually when we have children, we're just, praying for quiet. And she said, I would give anything to have shoes in my house. I would give anything to have sticky fingers on the door. I was like, wow, perspective. So if we're dysregulated and our child's dysregulated, we're going to butt heads. The favorite example of this is, be quiet as we're yelling that to them. I just love that one. I mean, how many times have we done that? Everybody be quiet, and we're being the loudest one. So if we're dysregulated, the child's dysregulated, we're going to butt heads. But if we're regulated because we took that space, if our kids are dysregulated, I promise you they'll come back down. And you can do this with a colleague, with a spouse, with anybody. If someone's really having a hard time, but you stay calm and cool, like at that 70 degrees, there's no place for this person to go except come down. I try this, like I was driving and someone drove by and was like flipping people off. So I just smiled because I thought maybe that brings him down just a little bit. Because what do you want to do? You instantly want to react. But then what happens, we just keep going higher and higher. But then here's the beauty. When we're regulated and our kids are regulated, You can teach them any skill you want in the world, because that's when they're using their frontal cortex and they can just soak it in. So that's what we're trying to get to, and we won't get it all the time. So tonight we're going to talk about how to have hard conversations and teaching moments in loving ways. And one thing before we get into our little kids, I want you to think of your home. And I found this and I really liked it. It's, do we have a nurturing home and structure? And I've gone to both, and I've done both in my home, where there is so much nurturing and love, but kids are literally about hanging from the chandeliers. Okay, that home needs a little more structure. And then I've gone to homes where it's very, very militant, and everybody is doing everything right, and I'm like, whew, we're kind of missing a little bit of love in here. So think about your home, and kids need both. We need structure and we need nurturing. And the more stressed we are, the more we go to the structure side and we forget the nurturing. So first we're gonna start with little kids, because they're just fun. And then we'll go to those elementary, then we'll go to high school. So some of the questions, your questions were awesome. So some of the questions about those little kids, everything you do with a little kid, and I'm talking about 6 on down, teach them through play. There has been so many scientific studies done that if we teach kids through play, they learn 80% faster than just talking to them. And kids don't have abstract thinking. So, when you're threatening to take Christmas away from them and they're 4, they don't get it because they have no concept of time. And then we're the ones that look so silly with that. But look at Sesame Street. How do they teach? Through song, through repetition, through play. And there's a reason for that. That's how kids learn. So books, I tell you, if I have a sand tray, today I met with a little 4-year-old, getting kind of old, but I'm on the ground and we're playing with sand. I tell you, we worked on being brave. We worked on where heaven is when you have a parent die. We worked on being at one person's home and then another person's home and how they both love him. We just did tons of work all through play. All those stuffed animals you have, line them all up, play with them, Play-Doh. Teach the skill through play, and kids learn so much faster. So one of them was Sibling Rivalry. That was a good one. And the things I thought about that is make sure we give kids time away from each other. Our kids need to love each other, but you know what? They're not always going to like each other. We don't even always like them. And you know what? They don't always like us either, and that's okay. But we can say in our home we will love each other. But sometimes you do need space from those brothers and sisters. But then I'd like you to be intentional about time together. And I'm talking 10 to 15 minutes and call that a win. Don't say, okay, we are going to have, the Waltons Christmas and be together for 4 hours. If we can do something for 15 minutes and there's no blood, that's good. And then we can just be done with that. But we have to be intentional. We have to act excited about it, not just go play. That go play, that one just doesn't work, especially if they're having conflict. Help them do surprise things for their siblings. Today we're going to do something for Sam. Nobody tell him about it. They're all going to tell him anyway, but don't tell him. But we are going to celebrate Sam today. Another really fun one is let them have moments to gang up on parents. Like kids, we get to have a pillow fight, and it's kids against parents. Water balloons, hide and seek. Kids love that, and it's a bonding experience. And then make sure we avoid comparisons and that we celebrate their differences, because that's a lot where the rivalry is rooted. Plus, it's rooted in maybe they're at different developmental levels and they do need space. Another one with little ones was meltdowns. Again, try and be curious to see if you see any patterns. Like, are they giving you any clues? Like, is it right after school, or is it right before supper time, or is it right before bedtime? Or is it right when they wake up? And I would try and do something different 15 to 30 minutes before that meltdown happens. Or if the meltdown's always at the grocery store. You know, when we have a baby, we bring this big old diaper bag everywhere. Well, you know what? I think we need a diaper bag the rest of our lives. It just looks different. But you know, if they're getting in the car after school, if that's kind of their meltdown moment, do I have a snack for them? Do I have water for them? Do I have gum? Although that's a little scary, but gum is very regulating. Do I have a hard candy for them? Do I have headphones? Do they just need quiet? You know, are they just so tired right before supper time that we're just going to shut our house down and just have a little story time and music? You know, they're telling you something about that meltdown, and don't use a lot of words. I would say things like, let me help you, we got this. You know, rub their back, because they're telling you the world's overwhelming. Behavior's their language. So when we look at those middle school or those elementary kids, there was a question about anxiety, which I thought was so good. With kids, we always want to help them name the fear. Because if you name it, now it's tangible. And I always make like a worry monster with kids, and then we make it really silly. We add polka dots and just make it really silly. And then I make the monster, like we'll do paper, and then they're way bigger. And then we talk about, you are so much bigger than your fear. But then that fear needs some place to land. So you could have a spot, and we're going to hang it on a worry tree. We're going to put your worry in a Bible. We got to do something with it. They need an action. We also need to teach calm, like help kids breathe. This little 4-year-old today, we pretended we had hot soup, and we took really big breaths, and we really blew the soup out. And all of a sudden, his body was all wiggly and relaxed. But we have to teach those skills, exercise. The number one thing with anxiety, and sometimes kids do need to see a counselor, but we have to walk through the fear. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I think we make as parents is you don't have to do this until the fear's over, but the key is we got to walk through the fear. I've seen that with shots. Well, I might not send my children to school because they don't like shots. Okay, we can't avoid everything in life. We got to do the hard. I had a beautiful high school girl that she couldn't go to school, but she felt better on weekends. I'm like, okay, honey, that plan doesn't work. We got to be able to go to school if we're going to do stuff with our friends. We can't have a stomach ache Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we feel much better Thursday, Friday. You know, we got to do the hard stuff. So telling kids, we can walk through this. I had another child today scared of the dark. Oh, she's super brave, and she's been playing outside till dusk because she had something hard happen when it got dark. So now she's super afraid of that. And then, you know, when kids watch stuff on TV and it loops, so really be careful of having certain shows on, because when we had riots in Sioux Falls, when there was protests and a few riots, okay, this little peanut, it was on CNN, so it kept looping, or that probably wasn't on CNN, but it was on Kelloland, it kept scrolling across, you know, this is happening. Well, when did it happen? It happened at dark. Something happened at their place about the same time. So what's her association? You know, dark is scary. You know, so we just keep practicing a little bit at a time. Correcting without breaking spirits, such a good one. And what I would say here is to remember that relationships always trump behavior. No matter how big the behavior is, guys, relationship always trumps behavior. It's kind of what Jesus does for us, isn't it? One time I had this boy, a high school student, who really got too connected with his electronics, playing video games, making some other poor choices, so I met with his parents. We made a plan about his phone, and then his parents said, okay, we'll have you tell him and we'll just step out. I'm like, what? No, we will all be in here together. And how I started it was, we got a really big problem. Your parents love you so much that they're worried about you. Now, where do you go with that? Okay, if you're in high school, we got to leave moments for that dramatic, like, sigh, slam doors, because that's just kind of fun. But what do you do with that? Your parents love you so much, honey, that they're worried about you. Do you agree that they have a reason to be worried? Yeah. Are your grades going down? Has your attitude? You're such a phenomenal kid, but your attitude's gone down? Yeah. So you know what? We're going to put some rules in place. And then I always say, you tell me when you're ready to hear them. Then I'm like, you ready now? Nope, not yet. Okay, we'll wait. But look at that approach versus give me your phone. I think relationship trumps behaviors. Then there was a question about lying. And I think if your child is young, and I know this could be controversial, and remember, only take the ideas that fit, and if I say something dumb, you just leave that here. But I think we get really, really stuck on tell me the truth. Now, granted, if they're an older kid, we got to be truthful. But if the lamp is broken and there's a 6-year-old here, I don't know. Don't you love that? Like, I don't know, lives at my house. I don't know. You know what? Now, we could live and die on that cross if we wanted. You will tell me. But I'm not the brightest person, but I can figure out the lamp broke and he's right here. He did it. So I'm not going to get stuck on that, especially if they're young. I'm going to do like, you know what, buddy? We got to clean the lamp up. And right now we're not going to go out and play at our friend's house. And I know you'll be ready to talk about it. You'll probably even come to me. I don't even know when. Might be tonight. I might even get a note from you. I might get a picture. But I know you'll be ready to talk about that. But you know what? Right now we're just going to clean it up. Just assume you know the truth. And I would just be so careful about getting into that battle, because then you're just going head to head, and why? You already know. So then let's fix it. And if there's a gentle consequence with it, that's okay, because we can have consequences. Someone asked about bribing children, and I put yes with 10 exclamation points. My favorite Christmas card at our house, I think I paid my oldest son $3, $2, $1. And everybody's like, oh, what a beautiful picture. And I am like, yeah. And it cost money just to get 3 little people to just stand and smile. But is sometimes bribing okay? Absolutely. But I also think we get to have expectations, but not everything's a celebration. One time in counseling, I wanted to talk to a parent, and they had a 10-year-old child, so not a little one. And they didn't want to leave my office. And, okay, that's just an expectation. Like, honey, I want you to go sit out there. I'm going to talk to mom a little bit, and then I'll bring you back in. And I know people get embarrassed when kids act up, and I'm like, whatever, I think I've seen it all. And she's like, if you just go out there, I'll buy you a pizza. And then she's like, okay, I want pepperoni and I want this. So I'm like, you know what, honey, come back here. You're going to go out there because it's the right thing to do, and you're 10 and you're brave and you're kind, and you're not going to get a pizza for it. No, that was an expectation. We're not going to celebrate a 10-year-old following one direction. So I do think we can bribe. I think there's a place for that and have fun with it. But I also think there's a time where we can have just expectations, and then that extra stuff we can celebrate. So now let's talk about those high schoolers, middle school, high school. So I wanted to talk a little bit about social media. You know, when social media or phones first came out, they weren't smartphones, and really kind of the lingo parents has was that they were a tool. You know, this is a way for you to reach me, this is a way for me to reach you. Well then, unfortunately, very quickly they became smartphones. And I would have to say, and not blaming this, but I think it's just a reality, since smartphones came up, pornography, anxiety, depression, and suicide have increased. So I just think, you know, as our brains learn new technology, I just think we want to be cautious about that. I think we need to outline rules ahead of time. I'm sure you've seen some of that, like parent contracts. Hey, buddy, here's a phone, but here's our rules first. That feels so much better than, you know, just like we're not going to give them the keys to the car without rules. Because if you have been clear, remember, being clear is kind. So if we are clear with the rules and they've signed it, and if they don't follow the rules, this is what's going to happen. And if it's on our fridge, everybody knows. So then there's not a big fight when they're not giving their phone back to you or when they're making a tough choice. So why not just have that discussion? But I also think, are we modeling, you know, good expectations? Sometimes I have a harder time with grown-ups I see than with kids. And I'll just say, I'll wait, you know, go ahead, take the call, answer the text. Kids are almost better at putting their phones away, so I always think, what are we modeling? I think phones shouldn't be in rooms at night. And let's say one of the pastors said that, not me, because that one is so unpopular. But one year I was so tired of that issue in counseling because then kids aren't sleeping well and then they're not getting up for school. And how many of us, raise your hand, are making great choices at 1 a.m. in our bedroom? No. And then think of these little teen brains. Woo. So I went to Shopko when they were closing out and I bought 10 alarm clocks and I wrapped them each up. And then every time I would tell, I don't want you to have your phone in your room, but it's my alarm clock, and I handed them a gift. And then they would say, so we would unwrap it, they would open it, and then they would say, but I love to listen to music. I said, push this button. I said, that's called a radio. You know, it's like, come on. It doesn't have to be your alarm clock. I think parental controls on the phone, know the terminology. I've met with many law enforcement people because I'm old and I don't know all the lingo, but I just always want to know what sites are safe, what aren't. But you know, I hear parents tracking their kids on their phone. You know, I also hope we can have some trust. But I also have so many kids tell me, oh, I just set my phone in this place, and then 4 hours later I come back and pick it up. Like, ooh, you know, they're one step ahead. So we also want to have trust, too. But our kids need breaks from the blue screen, because actually what we're doing, we're decreasing the melatonin that our body naturally produces. So it is impacting sleep. You know, you would never years ago hear a farm kid that couldn't fall asleep at night. You know, but now we have a whole world of people not sleeping. You know, an hour before bedtime, and I know this is all so old school, but we really shouldn't have that blue screen because it's actually alerting our brain instead of calming our brain. The other thing with teens is we need to create a place to pause, because what's happening is they want things to happen immediately. So you know how if you used to have a problem in school, you didn't see those kids till the next day. Well, once night comes, day comes, a lot happens. You know, you get perspective. But now it's just text and Snapchat, and it's like everything is immediate. And our kids aren't learning how to kind of sit in the hard. So I just really think we have to teach our kids like how to have some space to pause. There was another question about disciplining a child or a teen. I think we have to be clear ahead of time because they're the masters at debaters. Stay regulated. And I think be careful of impulsive discipline because they get so mouthy. And remember, they're so dang cute, but then they get here and they're smelly and then they get really mouthy. But just the answer's no. Yeah, no more discussion about it. If you want to talk to me about this tomorrow, or if you want to come back when you're calm, I just want you to know the answer's still going to be no. You're the worst parent ever. I know. Just agree. I did want to bring up sleepovers. Just because that's one thing I hear so much of in therapy, we can't assume that other parents have the same values as you do. So call those parents, visit with them. Because kids, and these are amazing kids, and we were these same kids. They just have more opportunities now. But they say they're at this person's house, and we assume that, but then they're not there. So just really, really, really be cautious of sleepovers. Not that they're a bad thing, but I'd always try to have them at your house. Dating came up. I think be clear ahead of time of what your expectations are, what your rules are, and be aware that dating means a whole lot of different things than maybe what it did years ago. I always think meet their friends, anybody that is special to your child, meet them, invite them over. Big thing, do not have a TV in the bedroom or in the basement where it's dark if they're dating. Why would we even set that up to be impulsive? I love that. We had one TV. The older they got, the less TVs. We're all in the living room having popcorn with every light in the world on. I loved it. And sometimes I got it wrong too. I talked to my oldest son. We had to do a consent form about sex education in middle school, and I wanted him to learn it from a Christian standpoint. So my husband was mowing. He mowed a lot that summer because we had to have a lot of discussions. So I found this great book, and just that embarrassment. He went to his room, slammed the door, because that's fun, that effect. So I slid it under his door, and he slid it back out. Yeah, and we never had that conversation, but he's married. I think life's good. I don't know. So sometimes we get it wrong. But my daughter dated someone, and both of my boys said, "Mom, not a good kid. Nice kid making bad choices." So I'm humble enough to ask. I asked one of her coaches and one of her teachers, get to know their teachers and their coaches. And I'm like, "Hey, what do you know about this?" And they both said, "Good kid, not making good choices." So we met with my daughter that night and said, "Sweetie, you're going to break up with him tonight. And you can do it, or I'll call his mom and we'll take care of it." And big and drama, and then we both wrote her a letter and said, "We love you, and it is our job to protect you, even when it's not popular." 7 days later, she's like, "Thank you, you were right." And you so want to say, "I know," but you don't. It's like, yeah, but you gotta not be afraid to have those hard talks. Explosive teens, boy, that is a hard one. But I really wonder what's going on. Is there drinking involved? Is there drugs involved? Is there weed, as a form of drugs? Are they not living according to their values? Like something's got them all fired up. And then I think, how do we find out what's going on with teens? They talk to us in the goofiest ways. Sometimes it's late at night. Car rides are great because they can't get out. Hobbies with them. My boys love chocolate chip cookies. I would just bake. They all come out of their little caves and eat. When is that moment? And then if they're not going to talk to you, look at these amazing pastors at this church. Be humble enough, actually it's strength, to say, Travis, would you come and talk to my kids? Or can I bring them and talk to you? Or if they have a coach or a favorite teacher, if there's a neighbor, because sometimes they will open up. If there's a grandma, a grandpa, because maybe you're a little too close, but ask someone else. Absolutely okay. And sometimes that's when counseling's good, because they know they don't have to make a counselor happy. They know there's probably not going to be as much like disappointment if they're making a poor choice. So nothing wrong with that. Just a few more that beautiful questions. Educating on hard topics, like in this world where there's so many hard things going on, I would ask a lot of questions. Hey, what do you guys know about this? Or what are they saying in school about this? Or what's your opinion? Because, they have been talked to all day long. And so if you can ask questions, and I think it's good for kids to be informed, but not inundated. That is just way too much for them. Probably my favorite question of all is when parenting, how do we parent when children are making decisions outside our family beliefs? Oh, that one just made my heart reach out to that family. I think we can love them and not approve of certain behaviors at the same time. And my guess is our parents did that with us too, right? They loved us but didn't always approve. And I think we can have that conversation. I love you, this isn't okay. Unless it's something that they can't help. I wasn't sure, like if a child has like same-sex attraction or something that's different than your values, then I would get educated on that. But if it's like having sex or drinking or vaping or, I love you, here's our rules, and we're going to follow these rules because I care that much about you. And if we can't follow these rules, buddy, we're going to get some help, because you are that worth it. Co-parenting, in-laws, two separate things. But co-parenting, I do think try and agree on the biggest issues if you can. And if you need to, go to a parent mediator. The biggest thing is one of the hardest things I have is when kids say, my mom and dad hate each other. Because really that's a reflection on them, because they're half of those parents. So we want to be so aware of that. And sometimes we have to just say, you know what, honey, I know it must be so hard because we do have some different rules. We both love you, but we have some different rules. And kids can handle that. And then in-laws, thank you. Thank you for your advice. I think we can just let it go there. Because then you get to do whatever you want with that, right? I had all these other comments, but I think sometimes, thank you. Thank you for that advice. And then the last couple, and then Travis is going to come up, but how to make church and parenting not separate. Whew, perfect question. And that comes to each of us. Are we talking about faith? Are we doing devotionals at home? Are we praying? What are we doing to make sure church isn't something we do on Sunday? And parenting, my goodness, what a time that we need God in our lives. So you will set the example on how to blend those. I just wanted to share a couple little book titles. If you have a teen that's really struggling, this Prayers for Prodigals by James Bank. And again, just a beautiful, beautiful book. It's 90 days of prayer. You just keep praying it over and over and over, but it was so beautiful. Julia Cook writes these great books for like that late elementary. There's topics like I don't like the sound of no, lying up a storm, tattletale, my mouth is a volcano. She is phenomenal, and there's just a zillion of these. And then for little kids, I love Dan Siegel, No Drama Discipline. He also wrote The Whole Brain Child. And then there's Gentle Discipline. And I'll have all these books here if people want to look at them. But also the Post Institute and Empowered to Connect. If you have kids from hard places, beautiful, beautiful articles. So the last thing I was just thinking is trying to remember that our children are gifts to us. And I found this quote and I thought, if we could do this. Be the person you want our children to be. But if we could just try that and then forgive ourselves when we get it wrong, because we're going to get it wrong. But children are so resilient, and you know what? They're going to turn out fine. We just have to help them along the way. So thank you so much, and then Travis is going to talk.